those cyber criminals, and they're going to do it for you, right, to keep you safe. And these attacks are also persistent and pervasive. They're happening every minute of the day. You know, whether you're at your terminal or not, as long as you're logged on, malware can be working on your computer. In fact, you know, if I were to do a quick survey here and ask you, how many times have you ever met a real criminal? Or how many times have you been a victim of a crime in the real world? Probably many of you will say, maybe once, twice. My wife, who has lived for 50 years, you know, she said, oh, please censor that comment. My wife was, okay, never mind her age. But my wife has been victimized 3 times in her entire life. But I asked her, you know, darling, do you know how many times a day you're attacked by a cyber criminal? Probably hundreds of times a day, but you just don't realize it. Or sometimes you see it. Sometimes your screen flickers. Sometimes you're redirected to URL. Sometimes this message comes on which says you have a virus, or you have to call the administrator. Of course, the administrator comes, puts in his password, and then suddenly your network is open to attack. Or you get pictures, you get emails saying, you know, here's a picture of this or that. That's already someone that's trying to break into your system. Plus, it's inconspicuous. The nature of cybercrime is that oftentimes you may not realize that you have lost your password, that you have lost your files until days or months later. And by the time you realize that the crime has been committed, the criminal has gotten away. And so one key message is that if and when we do catch these cyber criminals, let's try to make it harder for them also to get away. So if we were to look at our awareness, you know, and how we've tried to legislate human behavior in the area of cyberspace, of course, we had this period in the from 1999 to 2004, which we can call our awareness period. We actually had a first draft of the cybercrime law even before the E-commerce Act. Many people here have worked on them, on those drafts. I know they were mentioned earlier. We were not able to pass a cybercrime bill, you know, in the 12th or 13th Congress, but we were able to pass the E-commerce Act, which is Republic Act 8792. And we also had Republic Act 9208, the Anti-Trafficking Act, which covered the use of ICTs to traffic child porn. So at least, you know, these were already the building blocks of legislation to come later on. We saw several cybercrimes reported, but really these are just a handful, you know, less than 5. When I joined the CICT in 2004, we started to see that many more crimes were being reported. I can tell you, I can stand here and talk to you for hours about all the crimes that we started seeing reported. Phishing incidents, scams, hacks. You know, in fact, in this period between 2004 and 2010, we saw the Hayden and Katrina scandal. No? Who can forget that? And so there were 2 new laws passed, no, 9725, the anti-child, you know, 9208. And we also saw 9995, the anti. So you start seeing the trend. No? When we see an errant behavior, we put up an act to control that behavior. The most important thing about this period, 2004-2010, is that we decided that there was a need for data privacy legislation. Now, because at that time, data privacy had been covered in the anti-cybercrime bill, and we were also using a DTI ordinance to regulate that. But we saw that quite clearly there was a need for another bill just to cover data privacy. And so those 2 drafts were submitted. And finally, we now have the period of cyberspace legislation, 2010 onwards. Now, these were almost passed in 2010, by the way, but the 14th Congress failed to pass it. So the 15th Congress finally passed 10173, the Data Privacy Act, and 10175, the Cybercrime Prevention Act. So in closing, this has been quite a long history, but I just want to give us all the appreciation of what has gone into these bills. I'd like to also remind us that in order to get the big picture, we really have to read these bills back to back. Just like when you look at the revised penal code, you have to look at all the other amendments attached to it that have added new types of criminal behavior to the RPC. And so when we look at the Cybercrime Prevention Act, you know, I submit, and I would like to use this as in closing, to say that you cannot read the Cyber Prevention Act in and of itself and judge it that way. You have to look also at, for example, Data Privacy Act, which tells you as a citizen, as an internet user, what are your rights to the data that you have. So I'd like to end there. Thank you for your attention. And I know you're all waiting for the main act. Maybe I'll call Act Kat to come and to introduce our next speaker. Thank you.